right, man. I really had to focus. Been a little rusty.
Yeah, I know. We've been hitting the one-timers, and we get it back to 2 times a week. We had to end the year strong. It's December 12th. The year, it's still 2023. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast, and this is episode 734.
Yeah, yes, it is. And we have been doing a lot of travel. Well, you haven't traveled, but we've had a lot going on.
Yeah, listen, that's why we push when we can push. That's why we lay low and do our best when life dictates. Yeah, November was crazy busy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Thanksgiving my Mimi passed away. Had some family stuff to take care of. Then we had a run camp, and then this last week, coming off run camp, we had we're bringing a whole slew of brand new C26 coaches on board for 2024. So we had yourself and all of them come into town this weekend for a lot of learning, a lot of education, a lot of questions, and, the most important piece of coaching, which is the, mental and emotional exploration of oneself and practicing vulnerability. And it's been a busy last 6 weeks, but happy to be back on air with you. Happy to be back delivering another Tuesday podcast to our favorite people out there and all of our listeners. Hope you're all having a wonderful December. You're all getting jazzed up for Christmas. Because you've all had your lights lit up since October. You've had your tree up since September. So you've got about, 2 weeks left before it comes down and it's time for the new year, 2024.
Yeah.
Before we get into probably a little bit more about this weekend, but also the topic of the day, it's your first time tuning in today. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Time is valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes in the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to world championships and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also like to utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that is, way overcomplicated, way too confusing. It is a solid spot to get actionable advice and information from seasoned veterans. So be a part of that community. Don't be a lurker. Be a participant. We go in there about every 3 to 6 weeks, do a little bit of a Q&A, take the pulse of the community, answer those questions for you on the podcast. And at the same time, we have no sponsors. We have no ads, but we do have an important agenda, and that's to do our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah. I realized that since Thanksgiving, I've driven over about 60 hours. And
damn, that's more than you've driven all year, probably.
Yeah, I know. And I have officially given up my dream to be an over-the-road trucker. Not really a dream, but it was just one of those things like, being on the road, man.
Yeah.
Like,
being on the road.
Yeah. And I got back here Sunday. Yesterday I got it out and I ran my, the trail I'm trying to cut in, and I was looking out, and the lake, of course, is frozen. I've been having plunge withdrawals, and I was running along the beach, and I found a spot, stripped it down, jumped in yesterday. It was nice to be back.
Anybody around?
I mean, I didn't strip that far. I had short.
I mean, it's just checking. Like this time of year, and I've been to where you live, and isn't this kind of usually the time of year where people that hunt a lot, don't they put up like cameras, like webcams and stuff to like track?
Oh yeah.
Things are gonna kill eventually, and then they're gonna stumble across Mike Terali, stripped down to his birthday suit, and that, my friend, could really ignite
birthdays.
The female population around those parts.
Yeah, right. There's some construction workers hollering. But
they were catcalling you while you were stripping down at your skimmies top in the ice cold lake.
Yeah, it was more like, what the, you crazy?
Yeah.
No, I think
they probably about called you in. But yeah, I get it. I always have like a ton of admiration and respect for the athletes that we work with who are just like week in and week out road warriors that just put in so much time driving, if they're in sales or whatever it is they need to do. A lot of times it's in sales, but they're just, covering all kinds of ground, cruising through different states every week. It really is unbelievable. And that's, it definitely takes a special person to be able to do that. But then also it takes a lot of tweaking when it comes to training, because there's just a lot of variables, a lot of sitting, a lot of stress. But yeah, it was, you put in a lot of miles and a lot of driving, and I have too. So I'm happy to be back and not traveling until February for that run camp. And it was great to not, have to go anywhere this last weekend, but it was a great working weekend. Again, we had yourself and 10 other coaches in town that'll be coming on board next year. And it was awesome. It's, one of my favorite things to do is to teach. And I really had a great time. I'm really excited for this coming year and to be able to, share a little bit of my knowledge. And, it's fun. Like, I love what I do for quote unquote a living or for a job, but, it's more exciting to connect with other people, in person. And that was one of our topics. We talked a lot about, I'm not sure, I haven't gotten the feedback yet, but I would say they were probably a little bit surprised how much, none of that stuff was new to you because you've been doing this for quite a long time. But, I think, most people would probably be, I would venture to say we may be the only, like coaching weekend or education or certification course out there that there are tears when we talk. Because that's actually, we had quite a few coaches shed some tears, not in a bad way, but one of the things that, you and I, really strive and make a huge point to, magnify and concentrate on as a coach is that mental and emotional piece, in that, you don't always have to go there, but the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to communicate, the ability to articulate your feelings, and more importantly, to sit and listen to other people's feelings and lives, because that's so much of what coaching is. I was listening to a podcast on the way in today, and they were talking about how outside of your spouse, if you have one, the closest relationship you have a lot of times is your coach. And so if you think about that and the weight of that, but also the responsibility and the great stuff that can come from it, it can be a lot. So we spend a lot of time going through the mental and emotional side of training and vulnerability and sharing things and listening. And because I do think that's one of the most important pieces of coaching that, I'm unaware of any other coaching platform or certification. I doubt USAT and Ironman or any of these coaching certifications spend a lot of time on the mental health of the coach, even when there's just an insanely high burnout rate with coaches. The things that we listen to and have to navigate and also advocate for our athletes. So we spend a ton of time on that. It is the hardest part, in my opinion, of coaching, is that piece. Obviously, we spend a lot of time on training and the science, but yeah, great weekend altogether. I'm both drained but energized all at the same time.
Yeah. Well, the coach-athlete relationship is really personal, man. And we do kind of create that open door policy, and I think that's super important, because like you said, there is a high burnout rate for coaches, but also obviously for athletes in the sport. And I think, getting to the bottom of things and figuring out what really makes somebody tick and what they're really going after, and how, just sort of figuring out really their way to satisfaction and happiness is like the key. We talk about, like, there's a lot of, top of the podium type people out there, but most people are just trying to get, sort of more out of life. And I think they use triathlon as a vehicle, and it's really all about being open and discussing these things. I think, because it's a personal journey for me in that regard too. I love triathlon, but sometimes it's not always the answer, and it's great to have somebody to kind of bounce things around like that. And there's nothing better than having somebody that understands how you're feeling or what you've been through. It's sort of that kinship that, it's like most times we walk in a room and people don't understand what we've been trying to do or go through. And I think when you have a coach that's open to listening and an athlete that's willing to open up, that's some powerful stuff. And you're right. It's very personal. And, we bridge that connection with all the other coaches too. And I think that was a major point of the whole weekend, was just to build a genuine team of people that's comfortable and confident and opening up with each other and sharing these ideas, because that's how the whole thing grows,
No, you said that really, really well. And I think that's like, one of the pieces that we talk about a lot and we talk about in our agenda, to keep people happy and healthy. And I totally agree, right? It's I think everyone wants to improve, mm-hmm. right? Every athlete, no one signs up to get coaching. No one gets into the sport of triathlon. No one self-coaches. No one works up a training plan. No one works, with a group to get worse, right? Everyone wants to get better. We all want to see a return on our time investment, from a fitness standpoint, or if it's not, readily available after every single session, they want to see them, to some way, and they want to be able to rate their improvement. I felt stronger during this race. I felt, more controlled during this race. I was faster during this race. I'm getting closer to the, this certain percentage of my age group, in this race. I executed. Everybody, I think, every athlete in the sport, right, just from a personality standpoint and why they're doing it, wants to see a return, a physical return. And then one of the things we talked about, I think Friday when we got started, was that, one of the biggest pieces, especially for us age group athletes, where this is a hobby, right, we pay to do it, is that being really, really fast, or being really, really quote unquote fit, like a high fitness performing level, also doesn't mean you're really healthy. Right. And we talked a lot about that over the weekend, not just from, a mental and emotional piece, right? But, what are you putting in your body, right? How are you fueling? How are you taking care of yourself? And, how do you want to feel and look and breathe and be in the next 20 years? And that's just a really crucial piece that I think athletes need to understand, whether they're coached or not coached, is that overall global health is the goal. Right, prioritizing your sleep, your hydration, how you eat, how you fuel, your mind, your body. I mean, like, all these things are just incredibly important in creating the best life for you. And you talked about burnout as well, and that's another huge piece, is the burnout rate. And it's really hard to go back and look at the last 10, 12 years of full-time coaching and find an athlete that's burnt out, that took a global health approach of being successful, right? Triathlon was important, but it wasn't the almighty, right? They weren't willing to make sacrifices to their mental and emotional health for squeezing out 3 or 4 more minutes on their 70.3 bike split. They weren't willing to, isolate themselves and just do things alone, because it might make things a little bit easier, and that might bump them up from 13th to 12th in their age group. The ones that have been sustainable have found a sustainable, healthy, global health, or, managing global stress way to help navigate through things. And that's also, the recipe for success with racing, with development, is long-term. It's not a year. And that's, you see a lot of athletes have this. And I think that's like the crux of a lot of problems with athletes. And you and I do this all the time. We have like this really big agenda and this really big, like, specific outline we want to do for the day. And then we just talk for like 32 seconds and now we're off on like another huge tangent, but it's important, right? Yeah. But it's very important. And you see a lot of athletes, and you'll see it, starting in January. And I do think it's a very important message that training to me is a lot like crash course, immediate dieting. You will get huge gains, right, by making a significant change in how you fuel in your day-to-day fueling, especially if you're eating like shit, right? Even the smallest change makes a huge difference. But people will go on these, that's what they call them, yo-yos, right? There's a reason there's 745 different diet books and prep meals out there, is because That's how many times it usually takes for someone to find something that sticks, that's sustainable. Because people just go back and forth, right? They lose weight, they put on weight. And so you might see these huge gains, but then what happens is, and the tricks that it plays with your mind is that, let's say I dropped 10 pounds in 3 weeks. That's a little ton, right? Way above average. And then you crash, right? You put on 6 or 7 pounds because you realize removing all sugar and the creamer from your coffee and giving up bread and giving up, air for 4 hours a day, taking off, no caffeine, no bread, no water, no vegetables, boom, losing the weight. And then you go on a bender, right? You're taking in, 6 sleeves of, Reese's peanut butter cups, a couple, Tupperware boxes of trunk cookies, 3 pizzas, 6 bags of Tostitos, chips, and salsa. And all of a sudden now you've lost a pound. And now your answer, right, because what you did or what you thought you did was prove that in order to lose weight, you have to do something drastic. And then so you go on another drastic, right, change in diet and fueling and your day-to-day consumption. And you drop 6 or 7 pounds, right? And then the same thing happens again. And this time, right, because usually what happens is the time to get back to, regular dieting it gets longer and longer the more you burn yourself out. And then after 6 months, you end up not losing weight, you end up gaining weight because you go from a loss of 6 pounds to a gain of 8. And now, so you go back over a 3-month span, guess what? While you've lost at a period 14 pounds, you've put on 15 or 16. So now you're plus 1 or 2. People do the same thing with training. They do these very, very short, comprehensive, I guarantee you'll up your FTP by 3% or your gains will improve by 6% over all your competitors over the last 6 months. And anytime you do an intervention, you get, usually, unless it's the worst intervention possible, you get some kind of a benefit. But then what happens is that tends to become stale, right? Or that your body adapts to it. So your answer now is, well, if going hard, right, and putting myself through the ringer for these 3 months was the way to get this done now, and you get good results, and you probably will on a short period of time, right? Again, thinking about short-term versus long-term, then what happens is now your answer is to what? Do more harder hours to get the same result. And then you end up plateauing, you end up getting worse, you end up ruining, it's so much of your body in the process by, what you're trying to fuel, the amount of damage you're doing to your body, overtraining syndrome, you name it, and it happens. And then you're stuck and you're burnt out. And that's why, like, really imploring, which you would, I wouldn't say you would agree, but I would imagine you would agree that one of the hardest things to articulate and to communicate with an athlete is that this is a long-term project. Yeah. You are a long-term project. Even on like a day-to-day basis, I can't tell you how great, things are going because it's a one-off, right? Things take time, and then things take time to really iron out what goes well and what didn't work well. But listen, overall aerobic development, which is the key to all endurance sports, and 95% of your improvement will come from that, and where you'll race from, takes time, months and months and months. And again, it's something to, to really remember as you start this new year, whether you're going to be self-coach, whether you're going to be working off a program, whether you're looking for a coach, don't latch on to somebody who's going to say, or a plan or a program that's going to say you're going to get results in a month or 2. Yeah. And you might. I mean, most people will, regardless of what they work on, but make sure it's about gaining 10%, 15%, 20% better over 2 to 3 to 4 years than squeezing out 5 to 8 to 10% immediately return on your investment in the first 6 months. And then the next thing you do, you're chasing those same gains, right? That were astronomical because they were, you went way above and beyond what you're capable of doing, what you should be doing. And by the time life and your body and the stress catches up to you, well, then you're going to see performance degradation. And then you're going to go back to chasing things. And that's what leads to burnout, right? So again, always look for, as a coach, your overall global stress. How am I managing that? And that's kind of what we went through, like in that hour, that I made everybody put their laptops away and I put their phones down. and we all kind of went around the room, myself included, and, shared like something that was really, 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 really hard about our life that we had maybe never shared before. I shared something I'd almost never shared before publicly with them. And the goal wasn't to make people feel uneasy. The goal was to highlight that we all come from, right? Everybody in that room came from very, 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 very different backgrounds, male, female, some are in their early 30s, some are in their 60s. And you had everyone has preconceived notions about a person. But then when you hear these things about that person's life, a lot of things make sense, a lot of things click, but then you have a lot of empathy, right? You have a lot of an increased emotional and mental connection. And as a coach, to me, that connects you to that athlete in a much more significant way, because now you don't just become an advocate for their PR, you become an advocate for their life, right? How they operate, how they manage their time on this planet, which is a lot more limited than we think. And that to me is ultimately the key to unlocking a person's potential, is that not only do we each have an athlete within us, but we also, more importantly, have a human being inside of us. And I think that is a skill in society that we have lost, right? As much as you see people ranting online and ripping into people and, piling on to someone who made a mistake, we've forgotten how human we really are. And because it's so easy to ignore people or to not go talk to people or to tell people you're fine or to make up the story, and then we act like robots, we treat each other like robots. The truth is we're all human. And so in order to, yes, there's an athlete inside all of us, and that's what you ultimately want to get out and really progress, but ultimately recognizing and understanding the human being, right? That moves, that motivates, that raises the level of commitment of an athlete. That's the number one piece for a coach, because you can drive an athlete into the ground because they're almost two separate people, right? If you act that way. But if you don't act that way and you take a holistic approach to the person, right? The global approach, mental, emotional, physical, you don't separate triathlete from person, then you get a better result and you get a happier athlete, and a happier and healthier athlete is a higher performing athlete.
Yeah, man, I think it's hard to recognize improvement sometimes. Like I live up at this place where they're building a bunch of houses and stuff like that. And I'm sure that the developer wants his shit done yesterday, like he wants the whole lake filled in and that's sort of his Iron Man. But if you take it's like maybe any town, you leave for a while and you come back and there's like a new skyline. Or if you know somebody that's working on their backyard and their garden and everything, and they're just in it daily and they're making a lot of progress. But if you haven't seen it in a while, you come back and go, holy shit, you've done a lot here. And they're like, just kind of doing everything day to day. And you just don't notice it, I think, sometimes. And I think that's, with athletes, I'll notice that they've come a long way, but they don't feel like it, because it's just such a gradual thing. And, gradual change, it isn't really exciting. You know what I mean? It kind of doesn't. It's sort of like we decide we're going to do something, like you're saying, you just go crush it for 2 weeks and you want to just immediately be done and there and whatever. But then you kind of rebound and bounce. You got to bounce back because it's too much, or if it's your diet, you change it immediately and you're like, oh, yeah, I feel great. And then like 3 or 4 days later, it isn't what you would. I think, dietary change has to be gradual too. I mean, that's my perception on that right now. Is that if your gut biome is used to certain things and you try to just upheaval, I think that's why people kind of go through rough changes and rough spots and diets, like after a few days or after a week. The first few days are fine and it's like, I'm on it. You're mentally feeling like you could do it. But I just think that, we're trying to change our whole body chemistry with that kind of stuff. And I think it just needs to be patient. So, it's like this weekend we were eating, the snacks come in always, and you got a long day. That's just sort of how life is, in the business world or whatever. People bring in the snacks, and I feel like okay when I'm doing that and I'm around people and things are good and everything like that. But if I try to, eat a bunch of cookies and I'm just sitting here by myself, I really turn that inward and feel kind of guilty about it for some reason. It's really weird. So yeah, as you were talking, I was kind of, you're talking about happy and healthy and everything. And I kind of always come back to this thing about what is happiness, and do we have a real good perspective of what that even is? I think that the intonation of it is sort of like you're just fired up, and you're smiling every day or whatever. But sometimes this concept of just sort of being content with what's going on is really happy. I remember a story. My dad, he went through AA a long time ago, and it was like 2 months into his, I guess he was just going to meetings, but 2 months in, he was sober and everything. And I walked out one day, and he's just sort of leaning on his car a little bit. And I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He goes, "I don't know. I just feel really good right now for some reason." It was just the simplest little thing, but he just felt great, and he was obviously appreciating that. And I think that right there is really a powerful form of happiness, if we can recognize it. And I think that's one of the things that, it's almost like we have to sometimes shift our perspective on satisfaction. I thought about that a lot at run camp, actually, when I was, we were doing that marathon, and it was just grueling. And, it wasn't anything about the time or the watch or any of that kind of stuff. And I just was finding such satisfaction from the idea that I could do that. And I kept finding a way to get up the next hill and chasing things like that. We talk about don't spend your money on things, spend it on experience. And to me, that's exactly what that was. It was just finding experiences and knowing that it's doing the right things for you, or you're on the right path, you're chasing the right stuff, and just being okay with that. We got done, and yeah, we had medals for it and everything, but that as well as I do, that the memory of that isn't going to be the medal. It never is. And I think it's important to be able to realize that. I always come back to writing. I'm like, if I get out of my way, I have to just start writing in the morning and remind myself of that shit. Because, when you're out looking at social media, I think it becomes a mirror kind of, people bitch about something, or they go after somebody for whatever. And it kind of seeps into your consciousness and chips away at your vulnerability a little bit. And you kind of start to assume that in your mind, and you move with that throughout the day. You know what I mean? It's like these subtle subconscious things that kind of do. So I like to write and clear my head and realize that, like, hey, nothing's perfect. You're moving the right direction. You should be okay with this and be kind of satisfied with it. Because at the end of the day, my builder may want all this shit done, but there's people in there that, one day they framed out a whole house. That's got to feel good. That's part of the process. And they can see the product. Something's actually happened. So I think that's always a challenge for a lot of people, is being able to recognize that they're growing.
Oh, I mean, it's a huge problem. And I love the analogy. And even like on a bigger scale, like you see, like let's say I was to come back up and visit in a month. Mm-hmm. I would see 20 times the improvement of that place than you do. Mm-hmm. Because I haven't been there since July.
Right.
You see it every day. So you might not notice a couple extra 4x, some wood and some framing going up in a house 6 streets over, right? Or another level down, another foundation poured, another house sold, another, sod put in. Like you might not notice that because it's a very, very small gain of production.
Yeah.
But me, I'd be like, oh my God, like they have like really transformed this place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so they have, and we do the same thing. Like when we, if we're the ones trying to, to lose weight and we're losing it right slowly and progressively and intelligently, then we'll rarely ever really see it when we look at ourselves in the mirror, because we do that every single day. But you might go a month without seeing someone and they're like, oh, man, you look great. Like, oh, well, I guess maybe I have changed, like that's, that's just something that, like, another example, you're talking about your dad in AA, like my first 30 days in treatment when I got sober, I saw myself every day in the mirror. I knew I hadn't drank. I knew I hadn't, you know, I was working on myself. I was still tired. I was still exhausted. And all I really knew was that I hadn't drank. And then Allie, my mom, and my dad, and my sister saw me for the first time at this thing called Family Weekend, and they all like burst into tears because I looked so they're like, I don't even recognize you.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I was like, you're seriously? But I think that is one of the common frustrations, right? And in a couple ways, because you also talked a little bit about decision making and staying present. There's one of the two biggest roles I think a coach plays with an athlete is, one, in decision making, is we make enough decisions in our life each day. We make a ton, right? Just this morning, it's 22 degrees. Hayden wants to ride his bike to school. He's got, a long sleeve shirt on and he was repping my Dolphins jersey, or his Dolphins jersey, even after they just fucking shit a egg last night. In the last 3 minutes of the game, he was representing because he's a good fan. And he was saying, I was like, dude, you need a jacket. He's like, but I got this long sleeve shirt on in this jersey. I'll be fine. And I was like, dude, just put a jacket on. It's like, it's my job as your parent to make these decisions for you when you can't make them for yourself. And I immediately thought, this is what I do all day long, every day, for everyone. Because as a coach, that's what you do, right? You help athletes people, right? Human beings make decisions that they either won't make for themselves, they can't make for themselves, or having a lot of trouble making for themselves. Because every person makes so many small micro or macro decisions every day. What to have for breakfast, what time to go to, what time to schedule an appointment, how am I going to get so-and-so to here, what time should I leave, is there going to be traffic, what do we need to do for the plan this week, and what's our meal plan for the day, do we need to go grocery shopping, what are we doing for Christmas, who's getting gifts, what time are they coming over, what do we have the next 2 things, I need to pay bills, take the dog out, there's so many decisions, right, that a lot of times people don't want to make decisions for themselves, or they get lost in that, that decision-making chaos circle that they don't even know what to do anymore. And so it's a coach's role to make that decision for them, right? And relieve that stress for them. Just don't do it. Do a little bit less. Do something different. Like they don't want to make that choice. Then also from a progressive standpoint, like an athlete, asked me over the weekend or on Sunday, I was going through their week. It's like, hey, I think what I really need is to get some good actionable feedback on, like, how you see things. I need more, not metrics, but I need more affirmation that we're heading in the right direction. And I said, that's a great question. Somewhat hard to articulate, but here we go. And then it just listed out a couple paragraphs of how I've seen them improve and what I would expect, given what I've seen in the next 3 to 4 weeks, to be a result. And a lot of times, I think for athletes, you don't need a concrete result, right? Because everyone wants to test often and match, progressions and see exactly how to measure their progress. But a lot of times as a coach, you should be able to say, hey, like, I see you trending towards X. Now, I can't tell you, right, that you're going to trend that way and it's going to actually end up the way. But from what I've seen the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, if you continue to be consistent, if you continue to do these workouts and your body continues to react the same way it has the last 4 to 6 weeks, then what I would predict in the next 2 to 4 weeks is that when we do an additional, a workout or a session or a test, that I would expect a, 10 to 15, 20-second drop in pace at that effort. Okay, that's really all you need to give. But a lot of times, again, like an athlete can't see it, but is so doesn't spend as much time looking at it and absorbing. They might look at it, but one of the phrases I like to use with athletes is, you looked at it, but you didn't see it. And I say this all the time to, again, Hayden. He's like, where's my jacket? It's on his body, or, it's sitting on the back of the chair, like, 2 feet away. And I'm like, use your eyes. I don't see it. I'm like, just take a minute, slow down, use your eyes. I mean, every parent says to every kid they've ever had, or, yelling down from upstairs, I can't find my shirt. I'm like, if I come up there and find that shirt in the first minute that I'm up there, you're not wearing it for a week. and then he'll take another minute, legit 10 seconds later, found it. I'm like, no shit, you found it. Like you decided to like slow, because I always tell him, slow down. Slow down. And you'll figure it out and you'll find it. And so again, I say to athletes a lot, you might have looked at it, but you did not see it. Right? There's a difference in glancing at something and not. And what I mean by that is looking at it is you're looking at things on the superficial level, like on the exterior. Seeing something to me is absorbing it, thinking about it through objectively, putting, attaching reasoning to it, and then coming to a conclusion. Right? Well, it looks like I really just, had a shitty day today. Well, what I see is boom, 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 boom. Oh, well, yeah, okay, I guess you're right. Like I gave the example, over the weekend of an athlete, who was traveling and had what I would consider not a lackluster, but a surprising heart rate given the effort that was supposed to be or I anticipated to give out on a treadmill. And I just said, hey, tell me a little bit more about this. It looks too stressful on your body. Was it, in hotel treadmill rooms are really, really hot, pretty much almost always. And they were like, yeah, it was, 75 degrees in there, which is to me a little bit toasty for a room in general. But then they said, yeah, and I basically treated my body like a carnival for the last 5 days. That's probably it. I'm like, yeah. Okay, that's it. So that's a good example of looking at a session versus seeing a session. Seeing it meaning I got additional context. I know how to now to make a decision or come to a conclusion, an educated conclusion that's not based on whatever. And that's life in general, right? And we find that out every single day. You look through social media and you look at everyone's highlight reel, but you don't really see how their real life is going. Right. And as a coach, when you do that, you might look at their training peaks, but if you don't see it, right, by reading through things, understanding who they are and asking questions when you feel like you need to, then it's hard to make a contextual decision on the future based on, just the content provided. And I think that's a huge role a coach can have and that's where a lot of athletes get lost in their training plan or doing things themselves is, in our society, everything is do more, go harder, be better. And if you say that out loud, it seems borderline impossible and irresponsible to even attempt. Go longer, go harder, be better. Oof. That's a pretty high fucking expectation to have every day or every week. And that's the only way you're going to see improvement is to do that every week. I'm out. Seriously, I'm out. I don't want any part of having to commit to going longer, going harder, and being better every day. But that's how we've wired ourselves to think that that's the level of improvement. And I would argue, or not argue, I would guess that that's the cyclical nature of being stuck in training yourself sometimes or self-coaching, working off a plan. It's that second, you're second guessing, triple guessing, quadruple guessing, really everything that happens, instead of just trusting it. And I would, dare to say a lot of the answers a person might give themselves is rarely ever, what I need to do? Take a day off, or what I need to do is probably do 2 or 3 weeks of just aerobic work. And that'll probably help me out. No, it's because it's always, again, everything you hear, all the noise, all the filtering you do, all ends up coming back to the same place, right? Go harder for longer, be better. And that's just, and you wonder why people feel like they can't keep up and are drowning in lack of progress and then quit and burn out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you feel like this a lot. As a coach, you kind of have your eye on the big picture, and as an athlete, you're in the muck all the time and it's hard to see what's going on. I bet you, I'll see a lot of people actually training for their first Ironman and maybe 8 weeks out or something, they'll do a weekend and I'll be like, they're ready, but they will have no idea, I'll just see what's going on. And in my mind, I won't tell them that necessarily, but I'll be like, all right, I think they got what it takes. We just need to stay on point here and keep going and just keep moving the right direction. But it's sometimes, if you don't, like you said, if you kind of get tangled up in your thoughts and you don't have anybody to kind of keep an eye on that and, usually it's sort of, there's always sort of, especially with first timers, there's going to be like, hey coach, I don't know, this just seems impossible to me. And I'll be like, nah, trust me, I'm watching what's going on here and we got it, So you have to really it's just difficult to get out of your own head. I was talking to you before the podcast about it, but like sometimes I'd get in my own head like that and I'll start going places. It's like, what the hell is even going on here? I'll start looking at videos of tsunamis and just like, I'll find something interesting. And the next thing you know, I'm all over the place. But I think that's just sort of the baseline for what's going on in a lot of ways. That thing with Hayden that just resonates with me so hard is that I feel like we're just looking everywhere and we're not seeing anything. It's sort of that thing where you drive down the road and you just drove a half hour and you're like, what the hell just happened? I didn't even remember any of that shit. And that's a state of mind that's not necessarily something that I think we should strive for. And I think when we're out running, I mentioned it after run camp, but that was like one of the first times when I felt like I was actually absorbing what was going on around me. I was really in the moment. It was just so difficult. And so, it just kind of took a lot of focus. And when you do that, you just start seeing things differently. It's really weird. And I think on a daily basis, when you can really, shrink yourself into the moment and get little wins all throughout the day, there's so many little things, but it's also appreciating that and knowing that, you're building these little blocks all the time that are just going towards the right direction. And it doesn't always have to be something monumental or super exciting. And that's just the mentality, I feel like, with that quick fix and like epic, performances and all this sort of things. We all kind of want that, I think. It's natural, I guess, to sort of want these kind of like big accomplishments, but I think there's a lot more power in being able to be sort of satisfied with the little things. And, that's just sort of a daily pattern, man. Like triathlon, it should be an enhancer for everything we do. It shouldn't be the driving train in our lives necessarily. But it all kind of fits together. And if you got more, like a lot of times you don't have a lot of energy when you're in a heavy block, and it sort of starts wearing on you. Oh man, things start falling behind, or the other, your life starts to feel a little bit weird because you're putting things off because it's an energy issue, And I think that's so important that I think one of the things about energy is getting out of the moment, because you're always thinking about shit you got to do tomorrow, the next day, and like the big thing at the end of the tunnel. And when you get out there, that takes your energy, Every little thing is just, we talked about before the podcast, but the bandwidth, I just don't have enough bandwidth to be looking at tsunami videos all night, because it sort of takes away from, we kind of have to decide a little bit, that can be interesting, but when you go down that rabbit hole, you never know where it's going to end. And then the next thing you know, you've wasted, an hour that could have been done, doing dishes or getting other shit out of the way that's going to clear your plate for, training.
And it's one of the hardest things to do, right? Because I think, everyone wants to do so much, these days. And that was kind of one of the things that I talked a lot about over the weekend with coaches, and, everyone wants balance. In their lives. And it really is a myth. Like you're never going to have everything perfectly balanced, right? 50 and 50 or 33 and 33 or 25, across the board, or, 10% here, and do that 10 times. It's never going to be even. You just have to make decisions each day or each, week or each month. What's the most important thing to me, or even just right now, today, that I have to get done, or that I have to be successful, or more importantly, that what really matters most to me? What's priority? And then do that and live that and breathe that and train with that. That's it. That's priority. and it's never going to be balanced. It's never going to flow, right? It just, I mean, and I talk to this a lot with athletes frequently, and this is what we'll talk about on Thursday when we talk about, largely the myth of traditional periodization and how it lays out for athletes, and huge mistakes that they're probably making, and holes they're not filling or that they're missing is, we love to compare. And even traditional, scientific literature is largely intel is a lot of times gathered from highly well-trained or professional athletes who this is their job. Limited obstacles, limited stress, or if they do have them, they have a coach, 17 team members, a dietitian, a nutritionist, a strength and conditioning coach, a physical therapist, a masseuse, they may or likely don't have any kids, very little responsibility. This is their job. And then that's where training protocols or blog posts or how the Norwegians did things or how so and so did this, and you're like, oh, that's the ticket. And you look at their life and you think their life could not be any more opposite from me. Any more opposite. Like it couldn't be any different than my life. But yet we try to take that and apply it to our life like it's going to stick. And then we wonder why it doesn't stick, and it's kind of like putting two magnets. Why can't the two ends that I can't get them to stick. I can't get them to connect. Now, there's too much friction there, right? Because it's you have to figure out what's best for you and then do it in that right time. And if it doesn't feel balanced, then try to balance it or shift things. But there's just never really you can't wait for the right time, but two, you can't wait for things to settle down and be balanced because there never is. It's either a priority shift or a realization, understanding that maybe this, isn't as high as a priority as I would like for it to be, or as I act, right? Or a lot of times I had to tell athletes that, listen, you got to come to a realization that this is fine and we can take this trajectory, but your goals, your aspirations, your expectations, those do not match, right? Where you have training or fueling or diet or recovery or sleep on the priority list. And you see this a ton, right? You see a person, and it's how it should be. Like you see, correct fueling, correct training, sleep, diet, all these things like you see on a person's priority scale, on the 5, 6, or 7th list. But then on the return on investment, list or goals or expectation lists, you would think it matches their number one. All right. But if you look at number one, it's like, family, work, vocation, job, people, connections. But you're like, well, why are you expecting to get the results from the number one thing on your list out of the number 7? And I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with having it number 7, but shelving and adjusting the expectations that they should, mirror each other is where a lot of people get into trouble, right? And it's like they say, cash in, your words are cash in, whatever your mouth's writing checks your body can't cash, something like that. Yeah. And that's how I think the priorities go. And that, again, that's just something you have to be okay with, but that also stops people in their tracks. Well, I don't want to do this and I don't want to train. I don't want to try to get better if I can't get, number one balance level, priority results. Well, you're never going to get anywhere. Or I'm going to wait till things clear up. You know what, coach? Let me wait till January and then things are going to smooth down. Do you have a crystal ball I don't know about? Can you predict the future like I can't? Because things are never going to smooth out.
Yeah.
And the biggest, the most prohibitive action that gets most people away is not action, it's inaction and waiting for the right time, waiting for things to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. I really want to wait till I can, get, things where I can train 10, 12, 13 hours. That's how I really want to reach my goals. You can still reach them and doing 6 hours might just take longer. Because the fact is if you even ever get to the point where you can train 10 to 12 hours, 14 hours a week, 15, 16, you'll have become so untrained, it's going to take you 4 to 5 years to do it. And you're going to lose interest. When the reality is you can attack things in a practical, sustainable way for the foreseeable future and do it now. And here's the kicker, right? Spoiler alert. In the meantime, when you're training 6 to 8 hours a week and getting better and getting fitter and getting healthier and getting faster, guess what? It's also going to make you a healthier, happier person. You're going to manage life better. It's going to reduce your stress levels. And I had this conversation with one of our coaches who I also coach, obviously. And I just said, they're talking about a rise in HRV because stress was down. And I said, what I've found with a lot of athletes is that, or in resting heart rate too, is that a lot of times when stress is at a normal level or at a higher level, then really our training is there to maintain our baseline HRV, your heart rate variability. It's just there to basically keep you at baseline. High life stress, you train accordingly, you decrease that stress, you stay at baseline, right? So let's say it was 80 stress points up in life, and by training today, you reduced it by 80, you're at baseline. And then because they were saying them HRV has gone a lot up, but the coincidence, right, is that life stress is down. So when your life stress only goes up 20 points and you're able to dissipate 80 points of stress, then guess what? Your body becomes healthier. And so again, that's just one of the things I think couldn't be said enough when it comes to training and its impact on your day-to-day life and health, physically, mentally, emotionally. And how it's not just about performing your best on race day. It's about managing and performing your best each day in life. And that if you think training shouldn't be included to that, then you're wrong. If you think training, can be put off, sure it can. But just remember the choice that you're making by doing it, and the positive impacts. And are you putting it off because there's got to be a right time, or I have to have a goal, or I have to have a race? Take care of your body, take care of your mind, take care of your soul, take care of your health. And who cares what way you do it? I don't care if you climb 8 hours a week and do tiddlywinks for 90 minutes, whatever fills your cup, right? But don't be the person that's got their hands on the outside of the cup, keeping their hands warm, but never takes a sip, because it eventually gets cold and eventually got to throw it out. And it's just a huge pet peeve of mine, wasted coffee. But in general, wasted time, wasted health, wasted life.
Ed, quickly, what you said there about, keeping things at baseline by working out in stressful situations. That's but like I said, woo, I'm staying the same. It's like you got to find satisfaction in that. You know what I mean? I totally agree with it. And it's sort of like with me as an older athlete. Sometimes I just have to accept the idea that if I'm staying the same year to year as I get older, that's a win. I don't mean staying exactly the same, but I mean like as far as speed and time and race, everybody remembers back when they're a lot faster. And I'm not saying I don't have some of that in me, but it's all right, man. It's a tough one to swallow sometimes for me, but I just got to be all right with it and just stay baseline. That's a big win that a lot of us don't give credit to.
Couldn't agree more, man. Couldn't agree more.
Sounds good.
Let's wrap it up.
All right.
A solid comeback cast. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Hope you're having an amazing month. Looking forward to hitting 2024 full speed at around 30 miles an hour. Something sustainable, something energy efficient, and getting your best miles per gallon. We'll come back on Thursday, and we'll actually address the topic we want to talk about today, but got slightly sidetracked. Talk about periodization and planning out a year, or not planning out your year for a lot of people. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and it's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for a better, more efficient, supported way to attack your training and attack your goals and your health for 2024, click on the coach tab and find the coach that's right for you. And as always, if you need anything from Mike, he is available, crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you need anything from me, c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Good talking.
All right, man. Yeah, man. See you Thursday.
See ya.